Well, it's great to have this morning with me Steve Earl, who is a partner with the corporate agency BOLD, BOLDT, I think I'm right in saying. And Steve is an expert on the technology world, but more specifically now focused on corporate PR and the intersection between corporate and public affairs. And he's going to give us a little bit more detail on the company, where it's heading, and the sorts of work that he does for some of the big clients he's working with.
Yeah, thanks, Miles. So we're now known as BOLDT BPI. So that the agency was founded as BOLDT. Bold transformation was the inspiration behind the name, and then we were acquired by a group called BPI about 18 months ago now. So BPI is a US-based company that was set up by the people who are right at the heart of the Obama Yes We Can campaign to get Obama elected in 2008. So it was a digital marketing firm. It's basically taken those sort of digital campaigning smarts and applied them to the corporate comms world, and has grown, been a real success story in the US since those days. And yeah, it came together with us 18 months ago because it wanted to have a capability in Europe. So our offices are in Brussels, Zurich, Oslo, Berlin, Geneva, and London. So we're pan-European, and it was an ideal marriage, actually brokered by a client that we were both working for in the US and Europe, and said you two should talk because you're both looking for the same thing in the other direction.
Fantastic. So we're both, to a certain extent, serving bits of the technology world in different ways. But something that caught my attention as I'm looking more carefully at Gen AI and the influence of this generative engine optimization, noticed that was something that you're starting to talk to your clients about. And within that, the increasing value of earned media. So making that the sort of topic of the next half hour or so, how would you define earned media? I mean, it seems to me it's a much bigger thing than what we used to call editorial media coverage. It seems to extend much more widely.
Yeah, I mean, it has. I mean, when I started my career in agencies, 30 years ago now, there were 7 magazines covering local area networks in the tech sector. That was the connectors, the routers, the switches that plug office networks together. 7.
I remember it well. I remember it well. I used to sell
Terrifying.
stories to networks and other
Indeed.
magazines like that.
Indeed, all on paper, and then they rapidly shifted online. And the buyer was the IT director or the network head. And it was a conventional, enterprise-wide procurement, and we were trying to tell stories about what all this technology was and how it was going to change business. And since then, technologically things have evolved hugely, but of course the technology sector has evolved. So it's no longer just IT and the technology of getting information around and getting value from information. It's technology that's used by the defense sector, by the finance sector, by companies changing utilities, by transport. I mean, I've worked in all manner of different tech-related sectors. Tech has been the suffix for 10, 15 years also now around a lot of the work we do. But I think the other sort of changes we're seeing in earned media is that we didn't used to call it earned media, we just called it PR and media, and then there was advertising. And so you either you got people to write or say that what you were doing was good or your product was good, or you paid for the right to control that. So it was about commanding that airtime or controlling it by paying for it. And now it is much more about I wouldn't say it's a return, but it is there's a clearer focus on earned. So it's not just having the right to say it. It's earning that respect, building relationships, offering yourself up for external scrutiny across all sorts of earned channels. Now, those channels can be absolutely conventional editorial ones of news, features, and analysis as written by journalists of all description. But it's also podcasters, it's influencers who run their own channels, It is people who produce social video. So we are working, for example, with clients that are doing very conventional earned media work. They're talking to Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, large trade magazine, and they're delivering news and views through those means. And we're using digital analysis to better understand who's actually reading that content. So it's not just about circulation, which was always a bit of smoke and mirrors anyway. Frankly, we're able to understand who's opened it, not the individual, but the type of people that are reading that content, how many people have actually engaged with a piece in a newspaper and shared it amongst their networks, etc. So that's the conventional side. The less conventional side is working with um, networks and institutions and organizations to gain their advocacy and use their own channels, to disseminate a message or to demonstrate the company you're keeping or what you're doing or what your point of view is. So that is earned, but it's a different kind of earn that we've known in the past. Equally, I was working on a comm strategy and a delivery plan for an integrated campaign recently, and there was a question amongst our team around, well, okay, so going and talking to politicians and people who work in policy teams in governments, people who work in a transport department, for example, is that earned? Well, it is really. Okay, it's conventionally it would have been seen as public affairs, government relations, but you have to earn that forum. You have to convince them that it's worth talking to your client, and your client has an interesting point of view on potential policy change or how policy gets adopted or something that government should be thinking about. You've got to earn the right to do that. And so really a lot of the same rules apply to when you're earning the right to have the conversation with a journalist and have something appear in a magazine online. You're earning the right to have that raised in a political conversation or have it, be something that research team considers in developing future policy. A lot of the same rules apply.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm guessing in those scenarios, you've got to be very well prepared about in terms of what the outcome is that you're looking for. In other words, knowing when you've succeeded in a communication sense, and so that half the battle is to define that and then define one's view on the change that you're looking for, sort of thing.
Yeah, you've got to. I don't think the days of the it's never good practice anyway, but the days of having a script you can read from where you phone a journalist and say, this is what I've got to offer. This is my client. This is what it does. Would you be interested in having a conversation with? And that very sort of one-dimensional approach, those days are well behind us, thankfully.
Yes.
It's got to be a much more intelligent approach of, understanding who you're talking to, who their audience is, how they make money or how they do their jobs and what's the motivator for them. And then making sure that you understand, what's going to cut through with them, what the consequences of your action can be, and ultimately what's the desired outcome you want to achieve by having the conversation.
Absolutely. And how, in your view, does earned media fit into this whole sort of Gen AI search development? Now that so much more discovery work is being done, or business development, market research, etc., is being done inside the Gen AI platforms. Has that brought the spotlight on earned media more, in your view?
Yes, and it will continue to do so, although obviously it is fraught with opportunity, but also risk in that we could see policy or algorithmic changes that mean that, the big information platforms suddenly get source content from somewhere else. Yeah, for conventional communications, for people who earn a living, initially it's good news because you need to frankly fight harder to get the right kind of content scrutinized and published in those earned channels, and that's what generative AI summaries seem to be or are currently drawing on. So you look at that and think, well, fantastic. That means that it's an earned first approach. No, it's not quite that simple. It means that that earned is that credible source, but of course we've got misinformation and disinformation swirling. You've got bad actors all over the place. You've got an earned media or publishing ecosystem that has been absolutely battered by the last 20 years or so. So it's not just, they're not drawing all this credible information from one place. So you might find they draw it from a place you don't want it to be drawn from because the information was inaccurate in the first place. But it
Yeah.
certainly focuses the mind on what those earned platforms are, how they behave, and it's very different to the early days of search engine optimization when we saw the rise of search platforms, early noughties. Digital marketers were all concerned with how do you push that good content as far up the first page as possible and push bad stuff down, and paying students to build links, etc. So, that was the Wild West days where earned was invited to the party, but was just, we were a smaller voice in all of that. So we worked our way through what that meant for B2B marketing for tech companies, for example. But I think this, what we're seeing with generative AI, and it's all rocketed in the past sort of 6 to 12 months, is really encouraging for the future of earned media. But earned media, has got to sort itself out to align to the opportunity. And equally, the large publishers don't exist just to serve up content for generative search.
Absolutely.
There are all sorts of commercial interests in all this that we've got to consider. And frankly, I've seen a real rush from the comms sector of snake oil type approaches to this, but companies offering all sorts of services to boost your profile on generative AI, and you just look at it and think, it is so short term. It doesn't have a broader consideration of reputation, and that's really, really important in all of this. Yes, that generative AI summary may be the sort of tip of the iceberg reputationally, but there's so much more behind it that you need to be considering. And when you're doing positive communication, when you're doing that when it's issue driven, and you're using campaigns to drive home a message and drive engagement, the earned content driving a generative AI output is only one part of the equation. And if you treat it in isolation, I think it can be a slippery slope potentially.
Yes, yes. So what you're sort of saying is don't build content to hit those AI overviews. Build entire campaigns, and then on lots of different levels using lots of different channels, and that starts to flow up, or one anticipates that will flow up,
Yeah,
particularly if
yeah. I mean, it's
yeah.
not the same, but there are parallels with campaign development 15 years ago, where some communications teams were forgetting about Wikipedia in all of it. They think, right, okay, I want to do an integrated campaign. We're bringing different agencies together. There's an issue we're campaigning around, whatever it might be, and then we see what is on Wikipedia, and that's at odds with everything we've tried to promote and protect and project through our campaign. So if only we thought about Wikipedia and made that, a much more central aspect of our comm strategy, we wouldn't be in this position. Generative AI demands, not a similar approach, but as I said, there are certainly parallels, and in that, you certainly can't ignore it, and increasingly it will be central to the comm strategy.
Yes, so the concept of consistency across all channels and no juxtaposition in messaging is absolutely critical by the sounds
Yeah.
of it.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Interesting. And I mean, do you feel it's I mean, I'm thinking now a bit more about buyer groups and how people are buying, and you get these terrible statistics about the number of decision makers involved in buying enterprise tech, for example, which is apparently up to 23 decision makers. I mean, how do you see that sort of discussion fitting in? Is this Are we moving to a world where inbound marketing or content marketing is becoming a much bigger play than sort of trying to boil the ocean as we used to do without
I think so, but I think that there's also it's also true that there is just too much content out there, and so basic maths. You've got 23 decision makers,
Mm.
every single one of them, compared to days gone by when there were maybe 3 or 4 decision makers. Every one of them is going to have less time to contribute towards thinking about that decision. They're going to have less time to read material, They're going to be potentially more whimsical or more easy to sway. So that can work to some companies' advantage potentially, but it is much more about having the right sort of potency of message and absolutely knowing the audience you're talking to, which is always the case, of course, in any conversation in life. But what you can't do is go out with a generic message. You've got to be very, very targeted, very segmented. Again, interesting aspect, I think, to doing this kind of work is considering the relevance and the role of paid, earned, social, and owned content in all of that. All too often we've seen ourselves as parallel worlds. We'll earn the attention, someone else pays for the attention. Yeah, this isn't about just basic banner advertising or doing a promotion with a trade magazine anymore. It's often about having a very, very integrated approach to how you build those, not just that kind of profile of a product or service over the long term, but also the reputation of the business and the belief in what it can deliver. That decision making maybe by 23 people, but it may be over cycles that a consideration cycle of 18 to 24 months, and it may be something that is reviewed or renewed on a 5 to 7 year basis. So if you look at all that, those people are probably going to change jobs and job roles within those
50
cycles. So
50 or
there's a lot of stuff to
60%
track and understand there.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of sales processes that, of course, end up with doing absolutely nothing. 50, 60% of sales decisions just don't happen. In fact, they
Yes.
decide
Yeah.
it's better to remain with the status quo, and you've got all the factors like, fear of messing up, this sort of stuff playing against it as well. So there's so much in the mix, so much to track, as you say, which is now becoming part of your job and my job to some extent. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. So securing media coverage. Obviously, we started to talk about how the media has changed. I mean, certainly the trade media has shrunk dramatically in the last 10 years or so. And we now see in the national media a lot of paywalls going up. In fact, even sort of tier one trade as well. Is that having an impact? It sounds like you're able to get closer to who's actually reading what and how using, I guess, marketing tech tools. So do you think it's becoming easier to understand and explain the value of that, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, we've got a bit of an unfair advantage in our group because it was born from political campaigning, particularly in the US. Political campaigning, it's big ticket and it's highly sophisticated because there's so much at stake. And so the way in which audiences are targeted, media and content is understood, and all of that is, it's a case study in how to, how to do it at scale and speed. So, some of the tech tools we're using are, were used for US political campaigning purposes and now applied to corporate campaigns and reputation. So that's particularly interesting in that you can identify, to the individual. Obviously, different regulations, different part of the world, GDPR and European regulation makes it more challenging. But there are ways and means of understanding people's interests and engagement levels, beyond that. So I think, that it is increasingly becoming more targeted, but I think also, we are seeing new publishers in technology marketing now that are increasingly targeted themselves. No one believes that I'm not going to name any names here, but no one believes that a channel magazine was read weekly by 48,000 people in the UK avidly. Didn't happen. I once remember standing on a tube platform many years ago, watching a couple of tech decision makers reading a piece in a channel magazine that I'd placed for a client, and it was so disheartening. They both read it, turned around, looked at themselves, and said, "Load of crap." And I mean, God, I've got this piece into this magazine, but they don't believe it. That yes, so that's the problem, isn't it? There weren't the ones and zeros then. We didn't really know what impact it was having. We all had to do it because it was a race for attention. But now with even conventionally very analog channels, with that content being taken into digital environments, it is possible to track it and understand what, how people have engaged, what they've looked at. Increasingly, we're seeing video-driven formats like this, where you can look at, drop-off rates and what did they particularly engage with, what device did they, view it on, etc. So you can really understand whether a podcast is predominantly used by railway commuters on certain routes, if you need to look at it, geographically like that, and that can really help you to understand how people are viewing the content, thinking about the content, engaging with it. And for every piece of work where 50, 60 people never respond to the appeal for a sale, there'll be another one where I've had this many times over the years, where a client has a salesperson who has a call from a prospective customer, and they say, "I just read this piece in this magazine, and we want to talk to you about that." And it turns into a multi-million-pound sale, and you think, you think earned is important and influential, but it's difficult to, it's a bit of a dark art. It's difficult to track the outcomes. Sometimes it's absolutely 100% possible to track the outcomes, because when someone puts up their hand and says, "I read this and I want to buy it," so
Yes,
the
yes.
more signals of content or engagement throws off, the more it's possible to do that.
What you're starting to talk about there is, to some extent, is the quality of the ideas, and that those are the things which, or the vision, and those are the things that are engaging individuals, decision makers. Um, I mean, certainly the work I do on thought leadership, I find that it's particularly challenging thought leadership pieces which tend to move the needle, because they're the ones that get noticed. I can think of one paytech I'm working with where we challenged one of the standards bodies by basically saying they were over overindulging in compliance, essentially. And as a result of that, that sparked a conversation which led on to the CEO being invited onto their advisory panel, for example. And that definitely moved the needle in terms of building their brand. So it's the sort of the I mean, which rather suggests, do we need to spend more time with senior execs of our clients, sort of getting them to publicly engage in the markets they're serving?
Yeah, but it begs the question: do they want to spend more time with us? And that's a challenge. Is that
Mm.
perversely, in communications, we've often been bad at communicating what it is we do and how we add value. And if you can, you can talk CEO's language, and they really understand what's at stake and what this can do for the business or for their reputation personally, uh, that's when you get their attention, their imagination. And so, and there've always been sort of historical forums where, when we're in the agency business, we can do that. So when we're doing media training, or when there's a crisis response, when they really need our help at short notice, and that's useful for building those relationships, but it would be, much more productive overall for
Do it
everyone.
before the crisis emerges. Yeah.
Absolutely, not just
Yeah.
in terms of preparedness, but as you
Mm.
say, in terms of thought leadership and understanding, what is a vision, what is a policy position, how do you respond to change from a certain government or whatever it might be that changes the nature of, market priorities. So the more we can build those relationships, the better, really. And I think, PR's always had this identity issue in that no one really understood what we did previously. We were just seen as publicists, and then I'm forever talking to people about the sort of the sort of strategic advisory work we'll be doing, and clients will say, "Is that PR or isn't it?" It doesn't really matter. What matters is,
No.
people think your company does this, but it actually does that. People think that that this is your reputation, but there are bits of it that aren't cutting through, so you're not seeing the full impact. So this is
Mm.
what we need to do about it. These are the risks along the way. This is what you must avoid. These are aspects of behavior we potentially need to change. Those are the kind of grown-up conversations we need to have. And there is, obviously, I've been reading a lot recently about the changing agency business model, and it won't be the same pyramid. It'll maybe be an inverted pyramid, and concerns about junior roles and how do people come into the industry and how do they learn the ropes. It's not going to be photocopying and press monitoring and support stuff in the
Features
same
chafing
way.
is
No,
what we used to
we're
do.
not going to be
Stuff.
superannuated librarians anymore.
No.
There is an opportunity, though, for bright people who to really use their brains to become better consultants. and really advise clients and learn those ropes faster. So I'm sort of optimistic about the future, and I think there is an opportunity to do that, but there is going to need to be some adjustment by the sector in order to allow it to happen.
Well, it also sounds like a bit of upskilling is required,
Yes.
according to what you're saying as well. So
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So we've covered quite a lot of ground. I was gonna talk briefly about hype cycles. It's maybe something you're not quite so obsessed about these days because you're working with major banks and this kind of thing rather than well, you're also working with big tech. Um, I mean, do you think the hype cycle problem is contributed to potentially by PR? Do you think actually it could be going the other way? We could be generating the trust, which is actually telling the real story and therefore not overhyping. Can we break this hype cycle problem that Gartner outlined about 20 years ago?
Gartner that invented the hype cycle.
Well,
Yes.
apparently, yeah. One of the analysts apparently created
Hype
the
is it's such a
concept.
binary word, isn't it? Hype.
Mm,
You know, uh, communicators and classic earned media specialists have benefited from hype many times over the years. You think about the Wonder Bra billboard campaign of the 90s. That was an advertising campaign that was about first and foremost driving attention to earned media, and it was all about hype, getting everyone to talk about it. There's the there've been various members of the royal family spotted wearing certain garments, and suddenly they're flying off the shelves. That's hype fundamentally.
mm,
It's a
mm.
hype-driven comms strategy to get tongues
Yeah,
wagging,
or
word of mouth
influencer
drives.
marketing, I suppose, is
Yeah,
another good example.
absolutely. So that's when hype or um, rapid fascination is used to to companies' advantages. But of
Mm,
course, when it comes to in sort of deeper, more integrated marketing, so hype cycles in enterprise tech, for example, yeah, I think it's becoming counterproductive. And a whole industry has depended on it for some years now. Of course, we know that.
mm,
And so many clients over the years have said to me, how do we get onto that magic quadrant? How do we redefine the new quadrant? How do we redefine a space? And I get flashbacks to its meetings over the years. Well, why do you want to do that? Often, I think in comms, we're so desperate to communicate things and to show that we're doing stuff that we say, yeah, communicate this, communicate that. Sometimes the best thing to do is not say anything, not communicate anything for a while, keep your powder dry.
mm.
It's like, real life, isn't it? You walk into a bar and all you do is talk. People soon start to get bored of you. Sometimes you need to listen. That's a communication skill.
Yes,
And so,
two ears, one mouth. So,
absolutely, yes, but use them proportionately, and
mm,
so I think with hype cycles, there's so much behavior that's been sort of forced upon the enterprise tech sector as a result of those cycles where you have to be banging the drum all the time, you have to be visible, you have to pay to play to a degree, and I don't I think increasingly, particularly with 23 decision makers in a purchase cycle, companies pay less and less attention to it. A lot of people who've been around a while are wise to it. And there is, by contrast, you're absolutely right. There is, greater trust and belief in thoughtful content that demonstrates you understand the challenges of the sector. It's why, vertical tech media in accounting and utilities and financial services, those were conventionally great channels for delivering case studies because you'd see what your rival had done, or you'd see what an upstart in the sector had done, and you could you would take that back and discuss it at base sort of thing. So I think that things have moved on and changed a lot since then. But we've got to get out of the tram lines of these hype cycles because while it gives oxygen to brands when they and businesses when they are developing quickly, and in tech, obviously, the pace of change and development is the challenge. We're all, I think the publishing environment now allows us to publish, develop reputations, and manage companies' profiles at a greater pace than we have done in the past. And so the days of the hype cycle, I think, are probably numbered as a result.
yeah, yeah. Well, let's hope we don't have an AI market correction, which a lot of people are, well, not championing, but foretelling at the moment. So
Bubbles that have burst, surely not.
yeah, haven't been there recently, but when I set up Agility PR, it was at the back of the dot-com bubble bursting, so it was a perfect time to set up a small agency, I have to say, because disarray across the big agency land was mammoth. But yes, okay, so I think we've covered a lot. I mean, do you find yourself constantly looking for that sort of third party, not endorsement but advocacy? Is that something that is the sort of the quest at the moment in terms of knowing who those forums are, the influencers within that? Is that really where the work is happening?
It's an increasing part of it, and yes, often it is about understanding what that advocacy looks like, but also taking an expansive approach to it. So not just it might be nice if we got these people on board with the campaign. No,
Mm.
let's work out who the stakeholders are of that organization. Let's work out whether we have any history with them. Let's work out who else they're working with. Let's go in absolutely eyes wide open to driving advocacy because I talked about command and control earlier. Command being paid, sorry, control being paid, and command being earning influence and earning reputation and earning awareness. One further step removed is to work with advocates because you think, right, we have no direct control or command over. Well, you do have command if you create the right forums, and if you have shared interests and you're on the same side pushing for something and bring different perspectives. So I find this often is the case with media as well. It's not just about producing content. We have organised roundtable dinners and lunches and things like that, where it's people with different perspectives. Obviously, you don't invite wildcards or loose cannons to these things that are contrary to the point you're trying to make. But that breadth of perspective served up by one company around an issue can be really powerful for a journalist. You can serve up a lot of the story or help to sort of shape the view on something by bringing everything together like that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think what you then do is you perpetuate and add color to an argument or a point of view. And you write the story, don't you? As a result, because you've got lots of different perspectives in there. It makes for fantastic copy for whoever writes it up. It's probably yourself writing it up, P PR people, etc., writing it up, or
Yeah.
marketing people. But it can also be the attendees who might be key influencers and decision makers as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so no, that's really interesting. So you're obviously seeing a huge amount a huge amount of change going on. I think what comes through very clearly is this sort of the analytics, the measurements, the properly understanding the audiences that you're thinking about reaching and influencing even before you start that work. And I think that probably is the big change that digital marketing has enabled. I think is getting a lot more scientific. Um, I think we were probably accused of being almost a bit lovey in the old days, up there with copywriters in the advertising world.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas I think now it is becoming more scientific. So I used to laugh about the fact that I got an MSc in public relations. So say it should never have been an MSc, it should have been an MA. But maybe now you could earn your MSc just about with all the data science that's going on, etc.
I mean, yeah, 30 years ago, 7 magazines covering local area networks, you could sell hope.
Mm,
Now you've got to sell certainty, but you've got to know that it's going to make a difference. You've got to know that you can drive these outcomes. And the technology and the pathways towards that are there. So
yeah,
you just got to know fundamentally how to use them, but also understand that, to your point about science versus art, science can help, but there's still an art to it because it's still about ultimately building relationships and persuasion. And we're trying to get um, these people with precision targeting to believe what a company is saying or what its point of view is. And that doesn't mean that they're trying to hoodwink, one of my favorite words. You're not trying to hoodwink them. You're trying to communicate something often that is, just a factual account of capability. But you're doing that in an environment where there are very low attention spans, massively fragmented media channels, misinformation and disinformation swirling around, and you've got to cut through all that to make a difference. So you don't do that by chucking something in and hoping it sticks. You've got to be very, very deliberate about what you do.
Absolutely. So you've got to capture the imagination, but to sort of underpin any trust that you're seeking to earn with hard facts, proof, third party evidence, everything else. You've got to build the armory, if you like.
Yes, and you've got to be holistic in understanding all the different stakeholders that have an interest in that. Often the companies that rank well for trust are the ones that are founded by a family, fifth generation, privately held company, and it was the values of the founder that still hold true, and that's why you're trusted, because you've always said you won't. You'll always buy local for the canteen or whatever it might be, and you've built the reputation around that, and you make sure that you always deliver that. But these days you see companies acquired rapidly by private equity, delisted, relisted, diverged, merged, and it all happens so quickly. And external forces are often what's driving that. And then suddenly you've got to build trust anew, or without the benefit of the long shadow of the founder in the background. So you've got to create a new story. It doesn't mean you're this isn't vaporware. This is understanding the business, what difference it can make, what the advantages are of buying its product or service if you're working into the CMO, for example, and making sure that you can tell a really robust story around that, and you can protect that story as well. And so yes, I think the point is there are more opportunities for being assured about the value we're providing than there ever have been. So while the world feels like it's hard, it's complicated, it's much more difficult to do this kind of work than it ever has been. Yes, it is hard, and frankly, it's harder for publishers to make money as well these days. But they have the technology to understand who's actually reading their content and what they're doing as a result. So we're all in that together, really. The data is there. You just got to use it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, no, very, very interesting conversation, Steve. We could probably talk for hours, between us having more or less clocked up our 30 years in the industry. It's been fascinating and quite different. I mean, I've been speaking to a few different bosses of digital marketing agencies and B2B players, and maybe you can recommend the next person I speak to for a different point of view. But I've certainly found it very interesting to get your perspective. We wish you the best of luck with the many challenges that you're taking on.
Likewise.
No, thanks again for your time. It's
Great.
Brilliant, Steve. So thanks.
All right. Thanks again.
I'll pass this back very soon.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.